What if the reason your mind keeps running through the night, the fragmented dreams that feel like unfinished arguments, the waking at 3 a.m. with a thought already fully formed and urgent, the sleep that passes but leaves you feeling like you were working the whole time, what if none of that was a sleep problem? What if there is a specific, biological, completely identifiable reason that your brain refuses to go quiet even when your body is horizontal and the lights are off and every external condition for rest is technically in place? And what if that reason, once you actually understand it, points directly at something you've been doing during the day that you didn't know was feeding the problem at night? Because it does. And the reason I'm telling you this now at the beginning is that most people who struggle with this spend years treating the symptom, the broken sleep, the restless nights, the mornings that feel like the night didn't happen, without ever addressing the cause. They try supplements, earlier bedtimes, sleep hygiene protocols, screens off an hour before bed. And some of it helps slightly. And the fundamental problem continues. Because the fundamental problem is not happening at night. It is happening during the day. In something invisible. In something so automatic you've stopped noticing it's running. Here's what it actually is. Your brain has a processing system for emotional and experiential content. A system that takes the events of your day, not just what happened, but how it felt, what it meant, what it triggered, what it left unresolved, and moves that content from short-term experience into longer-term integrated memory. This process is not optional. It is biological. It happens whether you participate in it, consciously or not. And the primary window for that processing is sleep. Specifically the dream stages of sleep, the REM cycles that repeat through the night, where the brain does the active work of sorting, connecting, and metabolizing the emotional residue of your waking hours. This is not a metaphor. REM sleep is when the brain literally replays and reprocesses emotionally significant experiences, strips some of the raw emotional charge from memories, and integrates them into your existing understanding of yourself and the world. When that process works well, you wake up having processed something. The thing that felt sharp yesterday feels slightly softer today. The conversation that felt unresolved has settled somewhere. The anxiety about something difficult feels marginally more manageable than it did the night before. Not because the situation changed. Because your brain did the work of metabolizing it while you slept. But here is where it breaks down. And this is the part that explains everything you've been experiencing. When the emotional load you're carrying into sleep is too heavy, when the unprocessed content is too dense, too charged, too unacknowledged from the waking hours, the processing system gets overwhelmed. It can't move through the material efficiently. It keeps returning to the same content because it hasn't finished metabolizing it. It generates the feeling of working all night because it is working all night on material that should have been partially processed before you ever closed your eyes. And the dreams become strange and heavy and exhausting. And the waking at odd hours is the system surfacing for air. And the morning tiredness is not the absence of sleep. It is the residue of a brain that did hard labor in the hours you thought you were resting. So what is the emotional load you're carrying in? Because this is where it gets specific, and specific is where it becomes useful. It's not the obvious things. It's not the big stressors you know about and have names for. Those are part of it, but they're not the heaviest part. The heaviest part is the accumulation of small, unacknowledged emotional content from the ordinary hours of your day. The mild frustration you swallowed and moved past without registering. The moment of embarrassment you covered quickly and never returned to. The interaction that left a slightly wrong feeling that you didn't examine because there was no time and it wasn't dramatic enough to justify attention. The worry that surfaced and was immediately suppressed because you needed to function. The grief or loneliness or resentment that flickered and was filed immediately under not now. All of that goes somewhere. It doesn't disappear because you didn't give it attention. It goes into the queue. It waits. And the queue empties at night, in the only window where the brain has the processing bandwidth to work through it. And if the queue is long, if you have spent the day efficiently suppressing and moving past and getting on with it, then the night inherits a backlog. And a backlog means an overloaded processing system. And an overloaded processing system means the symptoms you already know. The running mind. The broken sleep. The morning that feels like the night didn't count. Here is the first thing that actually addresses this. Right now, not at the end. It is what I'd call a daily emotional clearing. Not therapy, not journaling in any elaborate sense, not an hour of scheduled reflection. Something much smaller. Somewhere in the middle of your day, or at the end of it, before you move into the evening, 5 minutes of honest internal accounting. Not analyzing. Not processing deeply. Just naming. What actually happened in me today. Not what happened around me. What happened in me. What felt hard. What felt unfinished. What I moved past without fully acknowledging. What I'm carrying right now that I didn't choose to carry but picked up somewhere in the last several hours. The naming does something specific, and it's not what most people expect. The naming doesn't resolve the content. It doesn't fix the frustration, or close the unresolved situation, or dissolve the anxiety. What it does is move the content from the implicit pile, the unacknowledged accumulation that the brain has to work through blindly at night, to the explicit pile. The named, acknowledged, known content. And your brain processes explicit content significantly more efficiently than implicit content. It knows what it's working with. It can sort it more quickly. It can move through the queue faster because the queue is organized rather than a pile of unidentified material that has to be examined piece by piece in the dark. 5 minutes of honest naming during the day changes what happens in the night. Not because the problems are solved. Because the processing system has better raw material to work with. There's a second thing feeding the nighttime activity that almost nobody names clearly, and it's the one that generates the 3 a.m. waking specifically. It's unfinished cognitive loops. Open problems that your brain has been running in the background all day without resolution, decisions unmade, situations unresolved, conversations that need to happen but haven't, things you said you'd do and haven't done, obligations that are hovering in the middle distance waiting to be dealt with. Your brain keeps a live registry of these. An active, running list of things that are unfinished. And during the day, the forward momentum of activity keeps that registry in the background where it runs quietly under everything else. But at night, when the activity stops, the registry moves to the foreground. And at 3 a.m., when your first sleep cycle has completed and the brain surfaces briefly before the next one begins, the registry is right there. Active. Urgent in a way that the darkness makes worse. And the thought that wakes you isn't random. It is almost always something from the registry. Something unresolved. Something your brain has been waiting for an opportunity to surface because it could not resolve it during the day and could not let go of it without resolution. The practical intervention for this is what I'd call a written brain dump before bed. Not a reflection, not a journal entry, not a structured exercise. Just a page. Paper is better than a screen, but anything works, where you move everything in the registry from inside your head to outside it. Every unfinished thing. Every floating obligation. Every decision you've been carrying. Every conversation you need to have. Everything you promised yourself you'd do. Write it down without organizing it, and then write next to each one, either when you will actually deal with it or a decision that you are explicitly choosing not to deal with it right now. The brain keeps the registry active because it doesn't trust that the unfinished things will be remembered and addressed if it lets them go. It is running the list as a service to you. And when you write the list down and assign each item a status, you are telling the brain it can close the registry for the night. The items are captured. They are not lost. They will be addressed in the time you specified, or they have been explicitly released. And the brain, receiving that information, can move those active files to storage. Which means the 3 a.m. wake-up loses its content. The registry has been cleared. There is nothing urgent enough to surface for. This sounds almost insultingly simple. It works anyway. Because the simplicity matches the actual mechanism. The brain wakes you with unfinished things because unfinished things are running live. You finish them on paper before you sleep and they stop running live. The mechanism is simple because the problem it's solving is simple. The registry just needs to be closed. There's something I want to say about the body in this, because the head not stopping while sleeping is never only a cognitive phenomenon. It is always also a physiological one. And the physiological part has its own cause that the cognitive interventions don't fully reach. Chronic mental overactivity at night is associated with a nervous system that has been running in a state of elevated arousal during the day and never received a clear signal to deactivate. Not a dramatic arousal. Not visible anxiety or acute stress. Just the low-level, constant, slightly above baseline activation that comes from a day spent managing demands, monitoring environments, suppressing emotions, keeping the internal machinery running smoothly while the external world makes its continuous requests. And that activation has a physical signature in the body. Slightly elevated cortisol. Slightly contracted muscles. Slightly shallower breathing. Slightly higher heart rate variability in the wrong direction. None of these are dramatic. Together they constitute a body that is not in rest mode even when it is horizontal. A body that is technically still and actually still alert. Still waiting. Still slightly braced for whatever comes next. And that physical state is incompatible with the kind of deep, clean, complete sleep cycles that would allow the brain to do its processing work efficiently. The signal the body needs to actually deactivate is not darkness and a comfortable bed. It's a nervous system that has been given clear, repeated, physical input that the day is over and the watch is complete. And that input has to be delivered before the head hits the pillow, not attempted during the sleep itself. Which means the hour before bed is more important than most people treat it. Not as a relaxation ritual in the performative sense, not a checklist of approved wind-down activities, but as a genuine physiological transition. A deliberate slowing of input, stimulus, demand, and activation that gives the nervous system time to begin its own deceleration before you ask it to complete the process all at once in the dark. Slow. Less input. Lower stakes. Nothing that requires output or decision or emotional engagement. Not because those things are bad, but because they keep the activation level elevated, and elevated activation is what makes the brain keep running when you need it to be still. I want to bring this to something that I think is the deepest reason the head doesn't stop, and it's the one that the practical interventions won't fully reach if it goes unaddressed. For a lot of people whose minds run through the night, the running is not just processing. It is also searching. The brain is looking for something that the day did not provide. A sense of completion. A feeling of enough. The experience of having done sufficient, been sufficient, handled things sufficiently, that it can genuinely release the day without the nagging sense that something was left undone or done inadequately or not done at all when it should have been. And for people who carry a strong internal critic, who hold themselves to standards that move as fast as they can approach them, who find it genuinely difficult to feel that today was okay, that they were okay, that what happened today does not require further review before it can be closed, the brain never gets that signal. The signal that the day is complete. That you can let it go. That you were enough in it. So it keeps running. Not looking for problems. Looking for resolution. Looking for the conclusion that the internal accounting system never issued. The intervention here is the most uncomfortable one and the most important one. It is the deliberate, conscious act of issuing the conclusion yourself. Not because everything was perfect. Not because there's nothing you would do differently. But because the standard the critic is holding the day to is not a standard that any day can actually meet. And waiting for the day to earn its own closure means waiting forever. Which means the brain keeps the file open. Which means the night keeps running. Before you sleep, one sentence. Internal. Honest, imperfect. Today was enough. I was enough in it. Not because it was all I wanted it to be. Because it is done and I am choosing to close it. That choosing, that active, deliberate granting of completion to an imperfect day, is something the critic cannot do on its own. It requires you. And it requires you to decide that your rest matters more than the critic's insistence on continued review. Your head doesn't stop at night for a reason. Not because something is wrong with your brain. Because your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Processing the day, clearing the queue, working through what was left unfinished, in the only window available to it, with the material you gave it, in the physiological state you arrived in. And the reason that process has become exhausting instead of restorative is not the process itself. It's the load. The unacknowledged emotional content from the suppressed and moved past moments of your days. The open registry of unfinished things that the brain is keeping live because nobody told it it could close. The nervous system that arrived at the pillow still slightly on watch because nothing gave it the signal that the watch was over. The internal critic still reviewing the day for evidence of insufficient because you never issued the close of business decision it was waiting for. None of those things require dramatic intervention. They require small, consistent, honest attention during the hours before you sleep. 5 minutes of naming what the day actually felt like. A written list that closes the registry. A genuine physiological slowdown that gives the nervous system time to follow you into rest rather than arriving there still activated. 1 sentence of chosen completion for an imperfect day. Small. Done daily. Not because each instance produces a breakthrough but because each instance is a consistent signal sent to a system that has been waiting for someone to tell it, honestly and repeatedly, that the day is actually over and the night is actually for rest and you are actually safe enough to let the whole thing go until morning. Your brain will stop running when it believes the day is complete. Give it the evidence. Not once. Every night. Until the belief is built from the inside. That's the reason. And that's the way through it.